Hello, I'm Mark Skinner from Mark Skinner Funeral Services, and I'm here today to tell you a little bit about funeral planning. Now, I'll have to apologise in advance because this is my first video, just in case it doesn't come out totally as expected. But why I wanted to tell you this and explain about funeral plans was because I think this is becoming something that is affecting lots and lots of people, and lots of people are continually asking me, should I have a funeral plan? Well, the truth is, if it's set up correctly and it's arranged by people who know what they're doing, the answer is yes, it's a great thing to do. But what's worrying us is the number of people who have being bombarded by people knocking on your door, cold calling by telephone, leaflets, advertising in newspapers, and in fact more recently continually on the television. Now, why does this worry us? Well, it worries us because we firmly believe that if you're going to purchase something like a funeral plan, you should really talk to the people you want to carry out the service for you. Now, many of the companies who can call you by telephone or will knock on your door or will drop you a leaflet through the post, what you have to remember is these companies often are basically marketing companies who are engaged by funeral plan providers to promote their services. So they know nothing about you, nothing about the area where you live, and we believe don't actually make enough effort to record your funeral wishes correctly. So what is a funeral plan? Well, a funeral plan is a method to actually arrange your funeral and in many cases pay for it at today's prices. This can be a really good thing to do because what it does, it allows for all of the worries to be taken away from your families and those who are left behind, but also ensuring that everything is paid for now to avoid rising costs. We've been actually arranging funeral plans for over 30 years, and we believe that we can offer the best plans that there are. The reason we believe this is because all of our plans are classed as fully guaranteed, which means that they don't incur any costs in the future. One of the negatives in the funeral planning world is that many companies now have decided to offer these plans, and many of them actually have nothing at all to do with the funeral service industry. Really, they're like a third-party company who provide, if you like, a financial service. But one of the negatives is that when you buy a plan from companies like this, they're not familiar with your local area, and often they don't record enough information about the kind of service you would like. Typical example of this is when we have plans referred to us by these companies, and what they do, they make allowances to certain elements of your funeral, such as third-party costs, which could be the crematorium, a cemetery, a minister, funeral celebrant, these kind of things. But often we find that their current allowance which you have paid is well short of what the actual cost would be today. Which you might think, why is that a problem? You've paid for your funeral. But if you read the small print on some of these plans, one of the problems is this allowance is fairly clearly defined. So with a plan we received recently, an allowance of around about £950 was made towards these costs, when in actual fact currently they're in the region of £1,250. So what that means to the person who's bought that plan is that at the time of their funeral, the funeral plan provider will be asking for more money. Now, this is not really good, and personally I don't think it's really acceptable. What we want to be sure about with the funeral plan is that all of your wishes are properly recorded and the costs you pay reflect the service you require. This way, in the future, there is no financial burden or worry placed upon those you leave behind.
Bye.
Recently, many people have also been contacting us because they've been approached by their insurance companies asking them to assign their life insurances to funeral plan providers. And many of these assignments are with actually national chains of funeral directors. So the question is this a really good thing for people to do? Now, I actually don't believe it is. And the reason I don't is because I've had 2 or 3 people recently who I've actually sat with and discussed this subject in some detail. Now, the first thing these people try to do is when they get you to assign your life insurance, they actually make you agree to use a funeral director of their choice. An example of this is with a gentleman locally by the name of Mr. Bishop, who we have actually helped many times with his family funerals. He'd actually got £1,000 of life insurance with a well-known national insurance company, and they contacted him and said, look, if you assign your life insurance to this funeral provider, you will actually get an additional £300 towards your funeral costs, which initially he thought, oh, this is really good, I'm getting £300 for nothing. But when he sat down and thought about it after agreeing to do it, he realised that he wouldn't be able to use the services of our own company. Now, he then called me and said, look, could I come and have a chat with him about it and see what the options were? So when I went to see Mr. Bishop, we contacted his insurance provider, and we were basically told that if he wanted his £300 death benefit, he would have to actually use a funeral director that they recommended and owned. Now, the point we made to the insurance provider was, yeah, that's fine, but can you actually tell us what this funeral director will charge for the funeral? And we were told that actually head office don't retain price lists, and if you want to find out the cost of the funeral, you would need to contact a local branch. So we did. We put the phone down and we actually rang this particular funeral company. Now, I will just put a little bit more detail in here. I'd actually explained already to Mr. Bishop what the funeral costs would be if we were carrying out the funeral. And these are totally verifiable by our website. So what we did, we phoned this funeral director and we actually asked them to give a quotation for the funeral which Mr. Bishop actually wanted. And it was quite surprising that their costs actually arrived at a total figure which was some £1,200 more than we were charging. Now, if we take off the £300 he'd actually been offered, he would have still paid increased funeral charges of £900. So is it a good thing to assign your life insurance to a funeral director that, one, you don't know, and two, you don't know how much they're going to charge? The simple answer is no. And if I would always say, if you're considering doing this, the best thing to do is get a quotation. Ring the funeral director that you're being advised to use and actually ask them how much they're going to charge you. And then get a comparison from someone like ourselves, because I think you'll be surprised in the difference of the cost. One of the other negatives is with this kind of plan, this gentleman in question only had a life insurance worth £1,000, but if you had a life insurance worth, as example, £7,000, how it works is that the full amount is paid to this funeral provider, and they then give you back the change. So in essence, they are going to deduct their costs without any question and return to you what is left, which means that you potentially will end up with a lot less money than you would have done. So overall, be cautious. If in doubt, contact us. We'll be able to give you some advice and some help in deciding what is best for you. So finally, just to sum up, what we recommend about purchasing a funeral plan. Well, totally I believe that you should always buy the plan from the people you want to carry out your service. And of course that doesn't have to be us. But I think if you talk to the people you want to look after things for you, they're always going to give you the best advice and the best service that they possibly can. It's always important as well to check that the funeral plan provider that your money is put with is with the Funeral Planning Authority, because this is a really good safeguard to help protect your funds and your funeral expenses for the future. It's really important as well to make sure that all of your money other than administration fees go into a funeral plan trust fund. Now, the reason I mention this is because some companies deduct initially enormous amounts of your funds to run their businesses. This is really not a good thing to do. So if you can actually be sure by asking what percentage of your funds go into the trust fund, I think that is reassuring. We know that with the plans we offer, there is a one-off administration fee, and beyond that, every penny of your funeral money is going into the funeral trust fund. We think it's really, really important as well to make sure that the funeral plan is fully guaranteed, which means that in the future, your family or those you leave behind will not be asked for any additional money. The only time that can change is if anything is changed in the plan or things added to it. But I think that's fair enough. Most people would accept that. The other thing that I think is really important nowadays is to check how much it would cost, if anything, to cancel a funeral plan. Because one of the things that we found recently is that some funeral plan providers are charging as much as 25% of your money to cancel a funeral plan. So if you pay, for example, £3,500, the reality is it will cost you somewhere in the region of £900 of your money to cancel that plan. Now, is that a good thing? The reality is it isn't. It's totally unacceptable. Other providers might charge £95, and in fact all of the companies that we're with only charge nothing. They don't charge a penny to cancel a plan. It's purely covered by your initial administration fee. So it's really important to look at all these things. And finally, if you have a funeral plan or you're worried about anything to do with a funeral plan, please call us, because we can look at it for you. We can check that what you've already have in place is totally acceptable and works to do what you want it to. And if you're thinking about a funeral plan, we would always give lots of advice, lots of information, go through every step of it with you and put all of this into writing so that you could consider it before any decision is made. So thanks very much for watching my first video. Hopefully it will have been a little enlightening and not too boring, although a moment ago you may have heard that very deep sigh which was coming from Milo over here. I think he'd had enough of all the talking and he really wanted some more fuss. So thanks for listening. Again, if you need anything at all or you want to know anything about any of this, just give me a call.